All right, hi again. So all the same disclaimers from the last video apply, which is I'm at home doing this. You may hear odd things, odd noises that go bump during the day, because after all, it's a snow day for all kids in Michigan. So anyway, let's talk about the question presented in this video, and then I'll do a separate one for the question presented in conclusion, and we'll slip in a couple other things like the memo header and the statement of facts in there. So let's see, we already talked about the big picture here. And so let's start quickly with the memo header. When you write the header for your memo, this is all the information you want to include. But one thing I'm looking for is how neat it is, because when you write something, people are judging you. And so if you look here, the to, from, date, and regarding all line up neatly. And then Lucy, Charlie, March, and Woodstock, they all line up vertically as well. So to do that, you'll type out TO : and then hit the tab, and then that will get you to where L is for Lucy. And then type from : hit the tab, and that will line you up. So by tabbing, it ensures that you line up. Now in the regarding line there, that's where you're going to put the name of our client and like a description of the cause of action, kind of what we're doing. So it might be something about assumption of risk under the Ski Area Safety Act or something like that. All right. Now let's get to the question presented. So the question presented is written only after you've written the discussion section. So at this point, you know exactly what the issue is because you just wrote a ton about it in the discussion section. And this really is like just the kind of the elevator pitch. If you haven't already, soon you're going to learn that you need to create an elevator pitch for yourself. So if you run into somebody at a cocktail party or one of the events that like Karen Poole puts on for career development and networking, you need to know what to say about yourself. What are you looking to do? What do you want to do with your life? What kind of firm you want to work in or not a firm or whatever. So anyway, that's what the QP is. It's just like a quick hey, bam, here's the issue. Now, the parts of it, this is what goes into it. It's a lot of information densely packed in. You need to tell the reader what the body of law is, the parties in the case, the issue, the legal issue, and you need to tell them what the legally significant facts are. And we do it in this very structured format. And here's the format here. You have under, does, and when. Those are the three parts. The under clause introduces the body of law. So for us, it would be like under the Ski Area Safety Act. And then the does, or the verb clause there introduces the question. And then the when clause introduces the facts. So here's an example from the book. You see under does when or under verb when. Under the assault statute is, and then the question is whether this person is guilty of a crime. When, and then 1, 2, 3. So this is the question presented from Appendix B in our textbook. So you can see here how we have the body of law. We know that we're under the assault statute. We have the precise question. We can make that more precise later on, but it's precise enough for the question presented. And then the when clause here puts all of the legally significant facts. Now, our textbook author likes to enumerate facts. Do you see the 1, the 2, and the 3? That's totally fine if you want to do that. I recommend it for longer paragraphs and things like that. When you get to drafting in a couple of years, drafting is a required class you take in your third year, you're going to learn more about enumeration and tabulation and organizing your text like that. But anyway, you're going to be introduced to it here. So feel free to enumerate if you want to. So let's take each of these pieces separately, like the under clause here. These are examples from the book. I added my little commentary, not terribly helpful, more helpful, and then just ignore it altogether. I think when you put the citation in the under spot of a question presented, the reader doesn't know what to do with that information. It's not like anybody can look at 32 USCA 1465 and know exactly what's going on. So I wouldn't do that one at all. And then the second one there, under the Motor Vehicle Code, that's more helpful. That gives context for where you're at. Under the Ski Area Safety Act, that gives context. The third one there, which I know the book is a big fan of, that's not helpful at all. Like under Michigan law, it's like, well no duh. So I wouldn't do that one if I were you. If you have like a common law issue, like a tort issue or something, and there isn't a statute, then I'd just omit the under clause altogether. All right? You think that's funny, huh? My daughters are video recording me while I'm video recording myself. All right, now.
You're recording?
Yes.
Oh, that's for...
All right, hurry up. They don't want to watch this. Well, they don't want to watch any of this, really, but... All right, I got to keep moving. Okay.
Okay, Papa.
All right. Okay, so this is the second part, the does part. This is where you ask the actual question. So here's another example. Does somebody have a claim for intentional infliction of emotional harm? So I don't know if you've caught on to this yet, but in the law, there's different levels of law. We start with like the broadest point, which is like policy. So that would be something like for like intentional infliction of emotional harm. It would be if you cause harm to somebody else, you have to pay for that. Okay, that's kind of the broadest. And then under that, we have a cause of action. And the cause of action says, basically, if you prove all of the elements, then you can recover. And then down a layer from that, the cause of action has elements. And so, like intentional infliction of emotional distress has different elements. And so there's like intent, or that you're reckless and you cause emotional distress to somebody. So that's the element level. That's 3 layers down. And then the 4th layer down is where each element has been defined. Okay, so there's at least 4 different layers of the law in our jurisprudence. The best one for the question presented is usually the cause of action level. We generally can't get down to the elements there because there's not enough space and it gets too clunky. All right, I'll give you some examples when we're going to do a little practice here in a minute. But anyway, just keep in mind the legal question is generally whether a cause of action or a crime has been satisfied or has been committed. Okay, and then the when part here. Here's just a quick one. I don't know if I would enumerate this. When the parties are considering merging and the records were sealed and blah, blah, blah. I don't know if 1 and 2 there is necessary, but you certainly may. And then you also see where the author here, the textbook author, worked in these shorthand references like Rocco and Darian. That's a nice way of introducing who the client is and then what you're going to call them for the rest of the memo. So I recommend that, encourage that. Okay, so here are just some things to look for. I'm going to start with the last one because it's the biggest one that people miss. This thing is a question. Even though it's really long, it's still a question. So be sure that it ends with a question mark. And then you should be able to read it from the first word to the last word, and grammatically it should make complete sense. Okay, so read it from the beginning to the end after you've written it and make sure that it makes sense. Now, I put in here just some variations just so you know that you can change things up a little bit for the under does. Sometimes you can do different formulations of that. Like this one here, it's a pure legal question. There are no facts, so leave out the facts. Here's an example. And in this here, you can see this on the PowerPoint later. This PowerPoint, by the way, is part of the week 4 materials. It's on Canvas under modules. I go through and I point out how, for each of these parts, the under, the does, and the when, you can be too specific or too general. And what you're looking for is Goldilocks. You want the thing that's the most helpful to the reader. So that would be like, under the parental liability statute. That's helpful. That gives us context for it. Where like under Michigan law, it's like, well, who really cares? That's not helpful. All right. Same thing with does here. See all the detail here for the question? Will a father be held liable for his son's actions in killing 8 students and 1 teacher? What if it was 9 students? Does that change? So don't put too much detail in there. Be more general. Like this one here. Are they liable for actions of shooting? Shooting is more general. Okay, and then the when. You can just tell here there's way too much information here. Wore black clothing, interested in violence. Too much there. And then in the top one there, and be careful, this is a big warning for everybody. You can't state the facts as though it's a legal conclusion. In other words, you can't state the facts to say that somebody met an element or committed a certain crime. Because here, see where it says here, when the child was an unemancipated minor and the parents did not know about the planned attack. Well, that's one of the elements, is knowingly. Did they know that this was going to happen? So that's a legal conclusion. You can't have those. So here's another good example in the PowerPoint for you to look at. Okay, now I'm going to set up a practice here and then pause the video and try to write a question presented based on this information. So this is actually a real case I worked on in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And so anyway, you can read the facts there, which are kind of disgusting. I'll let you pause the video there so you can read them. Okay, and then the prosecutor who got this case, he then had to decide what to charge this person with, and he chose this statute. And you can see why. Instead of a typical battery, he went for a crime that's a 10-year felony. And here it is. So I'll let you pause it and read that. Okay, and then on this next slide here, I put together in one place both the facts and the law. And I did that on purpose because writing an issue is where you write about where the facts and the law intersect. Where do they meet? And at that meeting place, that's where you often have an issue. So your job here, the process, is you read the facts and then read the statute here. By the way, are you thinking of Mike Tyson? Every time I read this, I think of Mike Tyson. But anyway, that part of the statute isn't at issue. So read the statute with the facts in mind, parked in your brain, and then figure out which words of the facts line up with which words of the statute. Every case boils down to just a word or a phrase of the law, and that's even at the U.S. Supreme Court level. Things come down to just a very narrow issue. Okay, so pause the video and decide what facts are relevant and what part of the law is relevant, and then put that into the format of under, does, when. Okay, so your goal is to write a question presented under, does, when. And you might, I suggest pausing the video, open up the PowerPoint, review the examples, and do your best to write it. Take like 5-10 minutes to do that, and then unpause the video, and I'll show you a couple examples. Okay? All right, so let's look at a couple examples here. So each one of these, I think, could be a really good question presented. Please understand, the first one is framing a slightly different issue. I bet a lot of you thought that intent was going to be at issue, so I wrote the second one and the third one here so you could see your thoughts reflected there. In real life, though, intent often isn't at issue, and in this case it certainly was not, because the guy lunged for this woman, and no defense attorney on the planet is going to go in front of a jury and be like, oh, this guy accidentally stumbled into her and he was just happened to be chomping his teeth and accidentally ripped out some of her flesh. No, they would never do that. The first issue I think is the most accurate, which is simply defining maiming. Is that much of a tongue maiming? and that's really the question. So the first one there has the facts that go just to that, and then the other two go to more of intent and maiming at the same time. So any of them are correct. It just depends on how you wanted to frame the issue, how broad or narrow you wanted to frame it. And then on this slide here, I just wanted to show the structure. In every single one, there's an under, a does, and a when. An under, a verb, and then a when. Okay? So that does it for the question presented. The textbook has a nice section on this with a lot more examples. I just wanted to highlight some things here and give you a chance to practice. So anyway, on the next video, we'll dive into the brief answer and the conclusion. So I'll see you then.